Yep, you read the thumbnail correctly. Let's just get into it. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new here. My name is Jacy, and I have a super crazy story time for you guys. Now, you might be thinking, Jacy, you've been doing story times for a while now. How have you been holding on to this nugget of a gold mine for so long? Well, first of all, I don't have to tell you guys every single thing about my life. But second of all, I wanted to make sure that you guys just liked hanging out with me and liked hearing my mundane story times before I gave you one of the really good ones. And I do have more really good ones. This story time is in fact about how I had a big ass tumor on my ovary. And if you guys aren't subscribed, I just thank you so much for coming and checking out this video, and I hope you'll consider subscribing so you can join us for other future story times, because I do have some other crazy ones. But again, I just like to hang out with you guys and tell you about my life, and this is just one of those crazy stories. So without further ado, let's just get started. So I'm going to start off by kind of giving you the very background of some of my health issues. Now, I guess trigger warning, but I will be talking about, lady parts and surgery. So if that, doesn't interest you or is going to be somewhat triggering, maybe don't watch this video, but just wanted to give that heads up from the get-go. But kind of all of my health problems started at a very young age. I got my period very early. I was, I think, in the 4th grade. And when I was about 13 to 14 years old, I all of a sudden stopped getting my period. And nothing about my lifestyle had changed. I wasn't exercising more. My diet hadn't changed. So it shouldn't have really happened. And it was kind of like, well, that's interesting. Keep an eye on it type of thing. And after 3 or 4 months, it was like, okay, I still haven't gotten my period. Let's go to the doctor and see what's going on. So I go to my pediatrician, and he was like, you need to go to a gynecologist and see if, something might be up with your lady bits. So I go to my very first gynecology appointment at 13 years old, and in this appointment, I had a vaginal exam performed where my doctor said, I don't feel anything going wrong, like I don't know what this could be. Let's send you to go get an ultrasound to see if maybe there's something going on inside of like your uterus or your ovaries. And I don't know if you guys have ever had an ultrasound done before, but the amount of water that you have to drink is kind of hilarious. So I just remember being in like middle school in class needing to drink about like a half a gallon of water, and I was a teenager. I wasn't drinking water, and so I just had to sit in like my language arts class chugging water until my mom could come pick me up from school for my doctor's appointment. So you just walk into this appointment with this huge bladder needing to pee but knowing that you can't, and I just thought it was really interesting as like a 14-year-old having to do that. So I go and I get an ultrasound done, and during these appointments the ultrasound technician can't diagnose you. They can't tell you what's going on. So I'd be talking to her and I'm like, oh, like, what do you see? And she'll be like, well, like your doctor will discuss any kind of results that we find. But you can see what they're doing. You can see the screen, and she is clearly zoning in onto some black lump inside of me. And it was just kind of like, she would zone in on it and then just stay on one spot on my tummy and be like, click, and like she would take a photo, whatever, and it was just all in the same spot. So it was kind of like I knew something was there, but I didn't really know what. She couldn't really tell me that much. But in my head, it was like, cool. It was almost validating in the sense of like, I told you guys something was wrong. Like nobody believed this 13-year-old, but I knew something was wrong with my body. It was kind of this weird intuition sort of thing. And so kind of seeing her zone in on that was just weirdly validating. I don't know. I'd also like to point out that if you guys know me or my channel, I am very optimistic, I am very lighthearted, and I don't mean to make any kind of jokes or anything about this whole situation. It's just kind of like, I don't want to say how I cope with it, but it's more of just like my attitude. I'm a very positive person. So if you think I'm almost like a little too lighthearted with this story, I don't know what to tell you. That's just who I am. So don't take that with a grain of salt. It's not going to be one of my funny, hilarious story times for sure, but it is going to be on the lighthearted side. So bear with me, okay? So I now go in for a follow-up appointment with my gynecologist. And so again, this was like 3 pretty hefty doctor's appointments in a short amount of time for a 13-year-old. And my doctor in that appointment says, okay, the ultrasound revealed that you have a very small cyst on your ovary. And the reason why I couldn't feel it in the vaginal exam is because you have somewhat of a tilted uterus, and pretty common, no big deal, but that's why we needed the ultrasound to reveal it. So from a very young age, I was put on birth control because birth control is the medication to combat ovarian cysts. It's basically, you know, it regulates your hormones and it's popping the cysts from within. So I was 13 years old, put on this medication, and then I was also instructed that I would need regular gynecology appointments and ultrasound appointments to ensure that, you know, the birth control was working and that the cysts didn't come back. So it was a really weird like badge of honor, I guess, that I felt like this super mature 13-year-old, and from like the ages of 13 to 18, I was going to the gynecologist twice a year. I had lots of doctor's appointments in the sense of I had to go to the gynecologist, then the ultrasound, then the gynecologist again. So just lots of doctor's appointments, but it was not at all like debilitating. It was not at all like a huge part of my life. It was just like yeah, I got shitty ovaries, so I gotta go to the doctor again. But during those 5 years, all the ultrasounds were clear, the birth control was working, no issues there. We were kosher. So fast forward to when I am 18 years old and I am off to college. And colleges, they're those great years, you know, when you're finally off on your own. You know, I got my own dorm room I got to decorate. I had roommates for the first time. And it was the first semblance of independence in your whole life. And so it was really cool. You know, I had a decent college experience. And even though I was only an hour away from home, it was the first time I was just, you know, completely on my own. Within the first year of attending college, I was a freshman years old. During my freshman year of college, I was 18 years old, and I very vividly remember I was walking to class one day, and I kind of stopped because I felt a little pain in my abdomen, and it felt like a period cramp, but I was not on my period. And I was like, that's kind of weird. And a couple days later, I had the same kind of pain. And that's when my intuition kicked in again, where I was like, okay, I'm very in tune with my body. I know I'm not on my period. That felt like a cramp. I think it's my ovary. Like, it's my ovary, it's gotta be. So I kind of just kept an eye on it for, you know, a couple of days, maybe like a week or so. And the pain was just an ache. It wasn't like some stabbing, like, oh God. It was just kind of like, oh, like, you know, like when you have period cramps, it's just like, oh, like, this one's hurting today, but it's just like a long ache sort of thing. It was like that, and it would kind of come and go in waves, but the fact that I wasn't on my period really keyed me into knowing that something was wrong. But because I was out at college, I didn't want to make an appointment with my hometown gynecologist because that'd be so many appointments that I'd have to go all the way back home for. It didn't really make sense. As a college student, I had student health care, and that kind of included like one free doctor's visit per year. And I was like, you know what? I know I don't get that sick. Let's just use my doctor's appointment for this. So I scheduled an appointment with the gynecologist on campus and went there. So at this appointment, the gynecologist essentially tried to convince me it was an appendicitis because it was lower abdomen pain on my right side. I had to explain, nah, dude, trust me, it's my ovary. Like, I know my body. I know I have this kind of history of issues. It's my ovary. The next step would be to send me to the hospital to get an ultrasound. And I basically had to convince him of it. That's a whole other story on itself. But finally, they did give me a referral to go to the LA hospital to get an ultrasound. So I had an appointment for like a couple days, and I remember I had to like take the day off of school because I was a college kid. I didn't have a car. I had to take 3 buses to the hospital for this early morning appointment, and I knew it would kind of take all day. So I take the day off of school, take my buses, and I go to this giant hospital. And this is a hospital way bigger than like the little dinky ultrasound place I was going to in my hometown. So I had to find my way around, go to the radiology department. Like, it was pretty intense. Like, I mean, I was 18 years old, but I was like, navigating it was kind of scary, but you know, I had done it before. And so at this point I was kind of like, I know what the issue is. It's probably going to be an ovarian cyst. Like, just up my medication. I don't really know. So I'm in the waiting room for this ultrasound appointment, and I get sat in the room and I'm chit-chatting with the ultrasound technician. And she was pretty like frazzled and stressed, I remember. And she was just saying like it was a really crazy day. And at this point, I was waiting for the appointment for quite some time. And she was saying like, oh, like it's just an ultrasound because you think it might be your ovaries. Oh, okay, easy peasy. This will be a quick appointment. And you could tell she was trying to get me out of there quickly because there were a ton of people in the waiting room and you could tell it was a busy day. And so she was like, cool, this is going to be an easy appointment. So I get my ultrasound, and again, my belly is full of water. I am about to burst like a water balloon. And same thing kind of happens where you see the screen and you see what they're seeing, and you can see that she is just zoning in on a black lump on the screen. And that's all it is to me. It's just some sort of black lump. And she's just focusing on one spot on my belly, just kind of like pressing in on it. And I could feel like a little bit of achy pain, and again, just some sort of sense of validation where I was like, I told you bitches. Nobody listens to me. Like, I told you guys it was my ovary. Like, I know my body. Trust me. So she's doing her little thing, taking her photos. This is my belly, by the way, and this is her thing. And she's just staying on one spot, kind of click, click, click. And she gives this heavy sigh, and she says, okay, you can go ahead and get dressed. We're going to take you into this other room, and we're going to bring in the director of radiology. And that's when I was kind of like, oh, that's new. Like, usually they just send the results back to my doctor, and they give me the diagnosis. So this was kind of new to me. So I get dressed, I go, and I get put in some room. And this nice man in a big white lab coat comes in, and he goes, hello, Jacy, I'm Dr. Radiology, and I'd like to share with you the results of your ultrasound. And again, I had never gotten the immediate results like that. I was just used to waiting to hear the results from my doctor. But I thought, like, yeah, they're not going to send it back to my school nurse who didn't really know what was going on. So this makes sense. He sits down and he says, so we have found a golf ball sized cyst on your ovary, and you need to get it surgically removed as soon as possible. And I was like, ay caramba, that was unexpected. So I was just like, oh, okay, this was news I wasn't expecting. Like, that's a pretty big size cyst. You know, a golf ball's like that big. Your ovary's only the size of a walnut or something. I don't know. You'd think I'd know. But yeah, a golf ball was a pretty huge size cyst. And he said, you know, do you have health insurance? Do you have a doctor at home who could perform this? Like, you need to get this out of you immediately. And I was kind of just like, oh, geez, I don't know. Like, I have a test later today. Like, are we almost done here kind of thing? Like, it didn't really sink in the severity of the situation. But he was saying, you need to call your doctor, like right now. Call your doctor right now. I will send him this ultrasound. We'll get everything figured out. But you need to go to your doctor and get this removed. So I leave that appointment, and on my 3 bus rides back, I called my mom and I was like, Mom, you're not going to believe this. I have a golf ball cyst on my ovary and I need to get it removed. My mom's like, okay, dude, that's a pretty big deal. Like, what's going on? And during this time, you know, that chief of radiology or director of radiology I'd given him my doctor's information. They were in cahoots. And at this point, I was on the phone with my doctor, and he was like, okay, how soon can you come out here for like an appointment to debrief and kind of like figure out what's going on? And again, I was like, well, I have tests this weekend, and there's a football game this weekend, but I guess I can come home on like a Friday, whatever it was. And so then I start like telling my roommates about it. I call my sister and I was like, dude, you guys, I need to get surgery. Like, this is so wild. Again, the severity of the issue was non-existent at this point. I make my way back home to my hometown, which again was only an hour away from where I was going to college, so it really wasn't that big of a deal. But I go to my doctor, I get sat down, and he says, yep, I'm looking at the ultrasounds. You have quite a big cyst. Like, we need to remove it. And we need to do it as soon as possible. Can you do it this weekend? And I was like, actually, no, I can't. During this time, my grandpa had actually passed away, and that weekend was his funeral out of state. And it wasn't so much of a matter of missing the funeral. It was more of like my family was involved in the funeral. They were making the arrangements, you know, like we all had to be there. They couldn't take care of me in some outpatient surgery, you know? So it's kind of like, actually, this weekend doesn't work well for me. How about next weekend? So we had scheduled the surgery for 2 weeks from that point to remove it. So one big kind of question mark was actually the type of surgery that would be performed. In this kind of debriefing with my doctor, I was asking, how much time am I going to have to take off? You know, how much time am I going to have to spend in the hospital? What will recovery be like? And it was this huge question mark because he couldn't really tell me if we would need to perform one surgery versus the other. So essentially, the goal and the good news would be I would get some type of laparoscopic surgery, meaning it would be minimally invasive. It's also referred to as like a keyhole surgery, where they kind of just do very small incisions and can laser out the cyst without needing any type of large incision. The bad case scenario would be a laparotomy, which is where they make one long incision and kind of have to remove it in that sense. He couldn't really tell what type of surgery he would need to do until he really got a look in there type of thing. So had it been laparoscopic, it would be, you know, 1 day in the hospital, minimally invasive. I'd be a little bit bruised, but I'd be good to go. If it was more of a laparotomy type of surgery, then it would have a longer recovery time. And I remember, kind of in hindsight, this is not great, but he didn't really prepare me for either. He was just kind of like, well, we'll wait and see. And so it was all really left up in the air of what was going to happen. And I was kind of just, you know, again, waiting and seeing. So I go to my grandpa's funeral, tell all my family all about it. That goes well. And then I kind of have 1 week to get my affairs in order at school. And this is the part where I am just so grateful for everybody who I encountered in my college experience regarding this topic, because every single person was so incredibly understanding. I probably wouldn't have graduated college without them. But I had to go to each one of my instructors and tell them, hey, I'm getting like major surgery this weekend. I have no idea if it's gonna be like allow me to come back to school on the next Monday or if I'll be out for 6 weeks kind of thing. But I'm getting this done, so what can we do here in the sense of homework? And every single instructor and professor was so incredibly accommodating, and I'm so incredibly grateful for it. But they were like, don't even worry about it. Oh my gosh, like you worry about yourself. And there was one instructor in particular, her name was Edna, I'll never forget her. She was my instructor for one of those like 200-person lectures, you know, like she wasn't really establishing these one-on-one connections with students because she was teaching hundreds at a time. And so I went into her office hours, I knocked on the door and I was like, hi, I'm Jacy, by the way, I'm in your class. Just want to let you know that I have a cyst on my ovary that I'm getting removed. And so I could be out for a few days or a few weeks. So just want to give you a heads up. What can we do here? She kind of like goes and closes the door and she says, tell me more, like what's going on? So I kind of explained it to her and I was like, oh yeah, it's no big deal. She goes, okay, well, I had the same thing. I had a cyst on my ovary. I ended up getting my entire ovary removed. And then about 10 years later, I had to get the other ovary removed for more issues. Like I have been there. I completely understand. Don't worry about anything. I'll excuse you from any homework. You can make up any kind of test. Like we can give you the reading delayed. Do not worry about it. And she was such a rock for me, like through that whole process. It was really interesting because I probably would have never made that connection with her, but we kind of bonded over that. And she just helped me through the whole process, but also ensured that like, hey, school should be the last thing on your mind. Take care of yourself. So again, I'm just really grateful for all of the instructors that kind of did empathize with me and made sure that I wasn't worried about like taking my finals if I happen to be on bed rest. So that was something really positive. Also, during this time, I had, again, a week leading up to this surgery. And that's when I started realizing, you know, my doctor didn't really tell me much about what this surgery is going to be like, what's going on. And up until this point, I was almost too lighthearted about it, just very much of like, oh my God, you guys, I got like a growth on my tumor. I got to get it removed. Isn't that crazy? But then I started doing the research and being like, oh, I could lose an ovary. Like, wait, and if I lose an ovary, that could make me more prone to early death or osteoporosis or cervical cancer. Wait, if I lose an ovary, that means I could be more prone to getting cysts on the other ovary and have to get a hysterectomy. And I started really psyching myself out. And again, I was thinking like, okay, but that's only if I get the laparotomy surgery. If I get the laparoscopic one, that's easy. Like I'll be in and out in there no time. Okay, let's hope for that. But wait, there's no way I have that one. I have too much pain. What's going on? So what I'm trying to convey is that I started freaking myself out and realizing, okay, this is a lot more serious than I thought. I think I should probably take it seriously. So surgery day comes. I had gotten all my affairs in order with school. I had told all of my friends who kind of were prepared to come visit me in the hospital or visit me at home when I was on bed rest. You know, again, everything was all up in the air at this point. So in my debriefing right before the surgery, my doctor said, okay, we're gonna do the surgery, see what's going on, and then when you wake up, we'll kind of tell you everything that's going on. So I am just so in the dark at this point. But I also, I'm like a broken record, some type of weird validation within me where it's like, I told you guys, like I knew something was wrong. And I kind of still had a positive outlook in the sense of like, okay, cool. We know what's wrong. We know why I was having these pains. Let's just get it out of me. This is good news. We know what's going on. Like this is good news. So I get put in my cool little non-slip socks. I get my little surgical robe on. I'm wheeled out on a gurney and I kiss my parents goodbye. And I go into surgery. And surgery for me was 5 seconds because I was knocked out. I don't remember even smelling the anesthesia. Do you smell anesthesia? I guess you inhale it. When I inhaled the anesthesia, I was just out. And all I remember next was waking up alone in a scary hospital room. It was not like my hospital bed, like my individual bed, but it was kind of like just some weird hospital room. And it was really scary because, you know, my parents weren't there. No other like doctor was around. And so it was just very bizarre kind of like waking up to that. And so I was fully conscious, but I was terrified for one and still a bit groggy at the same time. So a nurse comes up and she's like, Jacy, like, hi, welcome back. And all I can remember shouting to her was, did they take it? Did they take it? And she was like, did they take what? And I said, did they take my ovary? And just a very odd thing to say, but she was like, the doctor will be with you shortly. He'll tell you all about how the surgery went. Like he'll kind of give you all of the information. So I just had to kind of lay there and slowly wake up, you know, this 18-year-old kid alone in this hospital wondering, did they just take an organ out of me? Or like, did I have a small surgery and I'm just overreacting? I have no idea. I'm numb from head to toe, so no clue. So then another nurse comes and I'm like, cool, this nurse will tell me what's going on. Like, hey, what happened to me? And she, again, re-informed me, your doctor will let you know how the surgery went. But I do have good news for you because you are 18 years old and we are overridden with beds in the adult ward. We can actually put you in the children's ward if that's okay with you. So essentially, there were only 6 kids on the entire floor for the children's wing of the hospital. Had I been like literally a few months older and like 19 years old, I would have had to go to the adult section. I would have had to share a room with another patient who could have been like coughing up a lung with the Black Plague for all I know. I wouldn't have been able to have any kind of visitors and nobody would be able to like spend the night in my room. And so I was like, heck yeah, let's go to the children's ward. So they wheel me on my gurney through the children's ward. And it's just kind of funny because, you know, there's murals on the wall of like ABCs, 1, 2, 3s. And I'm like, I'm in college. But I was super grateful because I ended up getting my own room all to myself. There was like 2 couches for like my parents, for visitors. And the nurses were sticky sweet because they work with children. So they were almost babying me to the point where I'm like, stop, I'm an adult. But that's just kind of like one little tidbit that'll come in handy later, I suppose. So I'm in the bed, I have like an IV in, and I see that I had the big surgery. You know, there was no way that I would have been in that much pain. I had gauze all over me. I had the big surgery. But it wasn't until my doctor came in who revealed the true extent of the surgery. So he comes in and he says, okay, Jacy, I have good news and bad news. The good news is that we completely removed it, you know? That's it. That's the good news. The bad news is that you had a tumor the size of a grapefruit. Yeesh. And because of that, we had to remove the tumor, your ovary, and a fallopian tube. Yeesh 2.0. My cyst was a tumor. and it had grown to be 10 centimeters in diameter, which is the length of my thumb to my pinky. It was the length of a scalpel, and I will now show a photo of it, so if you are queasy, do not look at it. But this was my tumor. Again, a pretty doggone huge thing to be inside of me. And yes, they did have to remove my ovary and my fallopian tube. So I was like, oh man, oh baby, that was a soft ball inside of me, a soft ball that was encompassing one of my organs. That's insane. He said, but more good news, while you were waking up, and the reason why it took me so long to get here was we did a biopsy of it, and it was benign, not cancerous. And so we were all kind of like heaved this heavy sigh of relief, which was interesting because at this point we didn't know it could have been a cancerous tumor. We were just like, oh, I got a little cyst, let's get rid of it. So we didn't really have time to like get worried about it and then feel relieved, but it was also like, oh, okay, that's good news. He did say that they biopsied it and it tested positive for hair, skin, and teeth cells. So, sorry if this is too much information. Basically, my tumor was like growing another person. It was developing cells that make up another person. And I asked if I could keep it, and they said no. And I thought, that's so rude. What are you guys gonna do with it? Keep it in a jar on your shelf? Let me keep my tumor with my hair, skin, and teeth cells. They said no. They said no. So I had a 10 centimeter long incision on my abdomen. I had the equivalent of a C-section for this procedure, which was worst case scenario. You know, I was hoping for little laser beams to go up and dissipate the cyst. No, I ended up having a C-section for a tumor baby that was trying to grow teeth. That's disgusting. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Did I give a graphic trigger warning before this? God, I hope so. So I had to remain in the hospital for 4 nights, 5 days, I believe it was. And I'm just gonna tell some little stories about the hospital stay just to kind of lighten the mood. But because I was in this children's ward, again, the nurses were way too, I don't want to call them overbearing, but they were extremely attentive. And I had this button. So I had this little, it was almost like a little Jeopardy trigger, where anytime I felt any kind of pain, I could push the button and it'd give me drugs into my system. And it was like, they called it my little pain button. And I never once pressed it. I never once felt any kind of pain or reason to use it. So the nurses would come in and they'd be like, hey, you haven't used that at all. Like, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I don't really feel any pain. They're like, wow, you have an insanely high pain tolerance. It wasn't until hindsight where like people were like, that was free drugs, you dummy. Like you should have just pressed the button as much as you can. I was like, dang, that's on me. The first couple of nights of my stay, I had to reteach myself how to walk. They had made this giant slice in my belly and I lost a lot of muscle, I guess. And so I had to reteach myself how to walk. So they would hook me up to this IV pole and I would just do laps around the children's ward. And it was so funny because, you know, again, these murals, they're just so silly. I'm like walking past these children and I don't know why they're sick kind of thing, but just walking past their rooms being like, "Suh, dude," but walking super slowly, like my mom's holding my arm and I'm just going like one at a time. Also during this time, the nurses had to come to my bed, lift me up and assist me to the restroom. And by day 3, like they came in and they were like, hey, like you haven't used the restroom in a while. Like, is everything okay? And I was like, oh, I went. And they're like, you went by yourself? And I was like, yeah, is that okay? And they'll be like, yeah, I mean, we're just not really used to it. Like we're supposed to help you. And I was like, do you want me to call you next time? And they were like, well, no, I guess it's fine, but you know, just kind of like give us a heads up so we're not worrying about you or monitoring it. So I was like, oh, sorry. And then by day 4, I started doing all the laps on my own where they were like, whoa, you're taking a lap? Like you gotta, okay, like that's fine. And I was like, sorry, should I have warned you? They're like, no, I don't know, you're recovering faster than a lot of these children. And it's kind of unheard of. And so I was doing so well in the hospital that by day 4, even though I had to be there in the children's ward in my room, I kind of like was talking to the nurse. And again, I'm a grown ass adult. And I said, I was with my mom and we were like, hey, funny story. We have a friend who's giving birth to her baby in the maternity ward, like 3 stories down. Can we go see her? And the nurse was like, I don't see why not. It's not like you're trying to escape kind of thing. Like, yeah, if you come back, sure. So I wheeled my IV pole and my mom on my arm down 3 flights of stairs. I swear, it probably looked like she was kidnapping me. We go down to the maternity ward and we visit our friend who's in labor. And it was so funny how that's kind of like how I remember how many years ago my surgery was, is I just look to her every time she makes a birthday post and she'll be like, happy 7-year-old birthday. And I'll be like, oh, I guess it's been that many years since I had my surgery, because we were both in the hospital at the same time. So kind of a funny little tidbit. So during this time, I have friends come visit me in the hospital and I am in great spirits. You know, again, I'm a pretty positive person, but I kind of took it as, cool, we realized what was wrong with me. We got it out of my body. Now let's just recover and move on with my life. And so that's what I did. I went back home to my parents' house and I was pretty much like propped up in my bed for the next 2 to 3 days. I had more visitors come in and I had some wonderful, wonderful, wonderful friends and family who came to visit me. I actually had one friend who she made me cupcakes that just lightened my mood so much, because she put like, she called it my super ovary, or my super tumor, and she like made cupcakes with like these giant balls on top of them, and like that's just my humor. I so appreciated it, and they were all just really there to lift my spirits, and I was really grateful for it. So I took about, I would say, I think it was like 2 to 3 weeks off from school. I can't really remember. And then when I finally did go back to school, I really did have to take it easy. You know, like I had to reteach myself how to walk, but exercise was out of the question for like 8 weeks. Any kind of like strength training, don't even think about it for months. But I also just kind of had to deal with like the emotional trauma of it, where I went back to school and I was like, I'm 18 years old and I just had one of my reproductive organs removed because of a big ass tumor. I don't really feel like going to your frat party, Brad. So I do want to do another story time someday about just like my college experience, because a lot of things happened there that I didn't have a great college experience, but this was also just one of the contributing factors where I just felt like I came back as a little bit more of an adult than I was before, and so those were just some ramifications that I had to deal with. In terms of today times, I have to return to doing regular gynecologist appointments, which I already was doing. And I don't get ultrasounds done as frequently, but it's more of just like a keeping an eye on it kind of thing. But something that was really interesting about this surgery that I learned later was I have several friends in the medical field, and they tell me, so you're telling me your ovary tumor grew from a golf ball to a grapefruit in 2 weeks? That's not possible. That's terrifying. Something's wrong there. And so they actually attribute that my tilted uterus caused a misreading of that initial ultrasound when the director of radiology came in and talked to me. They say that it was user error, that they read it wrong because I had this tilted uterus. However, the jury's still kind of out. I didn't really ask follow-up questions to anyone, but to be, like, it's undetermined if the ovary had grown in that short amount of time, or if it was already that big sitting in my ovary, and just because of the way my body was tilted that they couldn't get a full read on it in that ultrasound. So I don't know, that's pretty crazy. But now I just have to keep up with my doctor's appointments. I'm still on birth control to try to dissipate that. They kind of like, I don't know if they upped my dosage. Can you up your dosage on birth control? I don't know, but basically right now it's just kind of like same as before, keep an eye on it, and if I start to feel any pains, I immediately call my doctor. Luckily, nothing like that has happened before, so that's good at least. Questions about this type of surgery that I get often is, does it affect my fertility? No, it does not. I basically just now have one ovary that's working twice as hard. So it still releases an egg every single month. It is doing the same work as 2 ovaries, but now it's just like a super ovary. It's kind of like the Batman of ovaries, just kind of doing all the work. That was a really weird comparison. But no, it does not affect my fertility. It does not affect my periods at all. Nothing about my reproductive system has actually changed. You can fully function without an ovary and fallopian tube completely normally. So that's great. I have since not looked into any kind of lasting effects of this surgery, which, if you're interested, it's called a Salpingo-Oophorectomy. We saw that on Jeopardy one time. It was really funny, and I was like, hey, it me. Yeah, so pretty scary stuff, but again, I am a pretty positive person that I was just all about, you know what? let's get it out of me and let's move on. And that's kind of still how I treat this. I have not looked into any kind of lasting effects of an oophorectomy because I don't want to know. I don't want, if I'm going to die early, I'd rather not know. If I have to have a hysterectomy 10 years down the line, I'd rather not be thinking about that at all times. I don't think that'll happen, but you know, you never know. You never know. But I know this video was kind of a long one, but I still feel like I probably missed some key things either about the surgery or the warning signs. So if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. I'd be happy to answer them. If you have gone through something similar, I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Or if you think that maybe you've been having some issues in that area and this could be what's going on with you, let me know your story. I'd love to hear what you think, and I can give my insight as well for you. But I'd also just recommend, you know, make sure you're keeping up with your medical records, make sure you're getting your doctor's appointments, and sadly, make sure that you're advocating for yourself. You know, I feel like I was so young in both of these instances that nobody believed me when I was trying to tell them what was wrong. And I kind of had to fight for my own health, and good thing, because, you know, I was able to fix the problem. But such a sad case with our healthcare system that sometimes you have to take the initiative, but I just encourage you to do that, you know, advocate for your own health and make sure you're taking care of yourself. But I thank you guys so much for watching. Again, if you're not subscribed, you know what, that's okay. It's kind of like we met each other at a party and we had a good time, but we didn't exchange Instagrams. We didn't exchange phone numbers. We're not going to hang out again, but I still had a good time with you. But hey, if you want to hang out with me again, subscribe. You know, I'd love to have you on my channel in the future. But I thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Toodles! And birth control is actually the medication that you would need to basically like pop these cysts. It's a medication to, you know, make sure your hormones are I need to be regulated.